When I was in high school, and I was a sophomore in high school, I worked a summer at an airport, and I got some flying lessons. So when I graduated from high school in 1948, I was faced with a 15 months draft. So I wanted to go into the aviation cadets. So I went to the recruiting office and talked to a recruiting sergeant, and he said, well, do you have 2 years of college? I said, Sergeant, I just told you I got out of high school. And he said, well, you won't be able to go into the aviation cadets. They require 2 years of college. So I said, well, I'll do the next best thing. I'll just wait and be drafted because I'm going to be drafted if I don't enlist, and then I'll go airborne. And he said, well, you can't do that. And I said, why not? And he said, they won't take you in the airborne if you're just a draftee. You wouldn't have enough time to be beneficial to the military for training you in jump school. Well, what I didn't know at the time was that he wasn't talking with a straight tongue. So in any case, I enlisted for 3 years for the 82nd Airborne Division, and went into service in August of 48, and went directly to the 82nd in civilian clothes. They were so backed up with people coming into service, and assigned to Charlie Company 504, 1st Battalion, and as a civilian in civilian clothes, in an airborne outfit, and it's just a little bit different. So I have to go through basic training, so they shipped me to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and I got basic training, came back to Charlie Company. They shipped me off to jump school. I went through jump school in April of 1949. My first jump was April 18th, 1949. We graduated April 22nd, and we got the combination glider wings and the jump wings. And we were told at the end of the class, the graduation, that we were the last class to receive glider training. It was a 5-week total course between push-ups, gliders, and mock-ups, and we packed our first 5 main parachutes and a reserve. So in any case, we were the last class to receive glider training, which I'd said, but they also said a very important thing. Colonel said, this class has unique distinction. I said, what's that? You were wondering, what was that? And he said, you came into the class with 200 people, and you're graduating with 200 people. We were the first class in the history of airborne to never have anybody drop out. Because I've talked to people who we went into class and we had 700 or 800, and half of them dropped out the first day. The other quarter dropped out the first week, that kind of stuff. They didn't know what they were getting into. Well, we knew because we'd been at Fort Bragg and done a lot of push-ups and running and what have you. So in any case, that's how I started parachuting. And that was the only way then that I knew how to get a jump, was through the military. So that started it. While I was in service, I went through 3 or 4 schools. One of the schools was Jump Master's School, but that's another story. I came out of the military with 35 static line jumps. We used to call them the dog leash, and 9 free falls. But the interesting part of the 9 free falls, it was a court-martial offense to make a free fall. Yes. So I went off the post, got training by a guy who knew what he was doing. He had 100 jumps, and he and I had gone through jump school together, and he kept his mouth shut about having had 100 jumps when he went through jump school. His name was Neil Stewart from Birmingham, Alabama, and he taught me to skydiving. He taught me to jump. We didn't know what skydiving was. It wasn't even a coined word. He just said, spread your arms, spread your legs. You'll either fall face to earth or back to earth. If you can't tell the difference between sky and ground, pull. That was my first jump course for free fall. In any case, I survived, and the first 2 jumps were pretty hairy, but we won't get into that. I made the 9 court-martial offense free falls. I bought a rig from Neil Stewart. I had it in my locker, and every time we had an inspection, the locker doors were open. And here sat this free fall rig, and nobody ever asked me what's going on with the free fall rig. So that's how I got into parachuting, and that's when I found out jumping static line, there's more to parachuting than flopping out of an airplane and having a dog leash open the container and start the extraction process. So in any case, as a result of that, I kept jumping in civilian life. And I didn't make a lot of jumps. I was making few jumps because they're very hard to come by. You couldn't get people to fly you because they didn't know anything about it and they didn't want to know anything about it. And they sure didn't want you jumping out of their airplane. So I got very few jumps. In 1955, I had jumped it 3 times in a National Aircraft Show, 1953, 1954, and 1955. And in 1955, it was at Philadelphia. The other 2 were at Dayton. And I met this man named Jacques Estelle, and he said, Lou, there's a world championship coming up in Russia next year, 1956. He said, we should form a team. And I, fat, dumb, and happy, yeah, okay, we should have a team. What do? Well, they fall out of airplanes and fall through the sky and this kind of stuff. So he'd been to France. He's a French, born in France, naturalized American citizen. He had been to the French School of Parachuting, and they had taught him some of the stability positions and maneuvers. So as a result of that, he considered himself an instructor to teach us. And we formed up in New Jersey and went through a whole bunch of training there. And from that, we went to Moscow. And we went over there almost defenseless. We had parachute rigs, but we didn't have passage back. And the only way we got over there was MATS, Military Air Transport. And Mr. Estelle, who had a military background with the Marine Corps, commissioned officer, finagled transportation on MATS. And so we got there. There was 10 countries. We came out 6 out of 10 countries, which is pretty good. And we beat the French, who were training us, because we'd gone to France earlier than the championship to get some practice from those folks. We beat the French and came out, as I said, 6 out of 10 countries. So as a result of that, Jacques Estelle formed a company called Jacques Estelle & Co., and I was part of that. And I lived with Jacques Estelle and his wife. I came up from Florida, got out of the construction trade, came up to New York, and lived with Jacques and his wife. And from Jacques Estelle & Co., we formed Parachutes Incorporated. And from that, that's a 3-year period now, Parachutes Incorporated, through Jacques Estelle, had leased Orange Municipal Airport as a jump center. And we had like a 20-year lease on it. So we set up a jump center at Orange, and it was the first commercial parachuting center. There was one at Elsinore, but it was almost club-like rather than commercial-like, or dual, I'm not sure. We were not a club, we were strictly commercial. You came in and you paid your dollars and you did your jumps. And we furnished everything but socks. We had boots, helmets, coveralls, parachuting gear, everything. We felt that socks are too personal to be a part of rental equipment. So in any case, that started it. We kept going. We had winter coming on us in 1959, so we closed the jump center down soon after Thanksgiving. And Estelle, in the meantime, had been to California and contacted the people out at Ryan Field in Hemet and set up a relationship there where we leased the parachuting rights, or leased the operation of a parachuting operation there. And we set up in Hemet, and that was our second center. So we got organized and all set up. And in the meantime, the, third, fourth, fifth, sixth World Championship was coming up. It was going to be held in Orange, Mass, 1962. So to consolidate people and equipment, we closed the Hemet Center and brought myself and the riggers and the instructors and all of the equipment back to Orange, Mass, and used it there. And after the World Championship, we opened another center in New Jersey. And then from that, we opened another center in Crawfordsville, Indiana. And then Estelle also tried to set up, because Hemet was not totally satisfactory. Jacques Estelle rented, I don't know how to say this, I think it was a lease on Elsinore Airport, was run by Cy Perkins and his son, and Cy Perkins' wife. They have a parachuting operation there. Well, it started, and when it did, it started raining in Southern California, and Lake Elsinore is Lake Elsinore, and it was like an almost dry lake bed, about the size of a good-sized pond. Well, when it started raining, it really rained, like it did here last night, and it let loose, and the pond became Lake Elsinore, and the water was 3 feet deep at the desk in the hangar. So there went Lake Elsinore. So the operation was then moved to another airport to the south. But that's the early background of Parachutes Incorporated. But being on U.S. teams in 1956, 57, twice in 57, and again in 58, gave us a lot of experience with world competition. In 1960, I was working at Hemet. I was center manager, president of Hemet, and we were doing experimental filming with free fall. Cameras mounted to the helmet, that kind of stuff. And I was asked to film back at Orange for a movie, a short subject. So, yes, I mean, I'm not going to turn that down. Yes, I'll go back to Orange. They furnished the jet transportation. I got a ride across country on a jet for the first time. And I arrived at Boston Airport on the 10th of July, my birthday, in 10th of July, period. So, in any case, that month, we had about 7 or 8 days in which we did a series of jumps. And we filmed group jumps, baton passes, landings, and all kinds of stuff. And it was put together by an outfit called Winnick Films. Leslie Winnick, I think, was the man's name. They did the ground stuff, I did the air stuff. And it was subject to, as an Academy Award nominee. And we lost to the Day of the Fisherman. And I have never seen the Day of the Fisherman. But all I can tell you is it had to be one hell of a good short subject to beat what we had, because what we had people thought was pretty sensational. So, and also at the same time, I was asked by Sports Illustrated to do some free fall still photography. What we did for The Sport Is Born was all motion. So we had a still camera, and I filmed Bill Jolly and Lynn Pyland, both jumpers and instructors at the center, doing baton passes. And we got the cover and 5 inside pages in color in Sports Illustrated, and immodestly, with all the great photography that exists today and all the great shots that have appeared in magazines, nobody else has shot the cover. And I'm so disappointed that Sports Illustrated didn't use some of these shots. You know, the 400-way formation, the 100-way CRW formation. It's the fantastic photography of that, just absolutely beautiful. Both episodes, but none of that made the cover. It's all ended up inside. So that's my claim to fame.
Now, your license number is D number 1.
Yes.
Tell us how you ended up with D number 1.
Okay, good story. 4 of us were together. One man doesn't remember this. He's still alive, Dick Tompkins. Dick Tompkins, Joe Crane, Jacques Estelle, and myself sat down and said, we've got to come up with a higher license number, because C license was the highest in the country at that time. So we wrote up the requirements, and we didn't write them up for ourselves. We wrote them up nationally, and to confirm the fact that we did good judgment, or use good judgments, those qualifications with a few minor additions exist today in the D license. So, and we also did the instructors rating because there'd never been an instructors rating in the country. And Jacques Cousteau was fascinated with this instructor program because he knew if parachuting was going to develop, we had to get instructors out, we had to get college students into the jump centers, we had to elevate the class of skydiving so that, like today, we got PhDs and engineers and scientists and astronauts and what have you parachuting, and would never have happened back then because parachuting was considered a low-class, you're out of your mind activity. Well, it's elevated itself, and I'm getting off the subject of the D license, but when we finished the program, there was only 2 of us qualified, Jacques Cousteau and myself. Joe Crane had like 689 jumps, and Dick Tompkins had much less than that, I believe, at the time. In any case, Jacques said, well, I'll take D1 and instructor 1. I said, whoa, wait a minute. I'm as qualified as you are, and maybe even a little bit more qualified. He said, we'll flip a coin. I said, what are we flipping for? He says, we're flipping for the instructor's rating. And I said, fine. Now, what happens with the D license when we flip for the instructor's rating? He says, whoever gets instructor 1 will get D2. I said, okay. I always call heads. I turned it up, tails. I got D1 by default because Estelle lost it by taking instructor 1. I'm instructor 2. I don't sign that anymore. I was on the board of directors of the Parachute Club of America, and they took away, it's somebody else. They took away the longevity of the instructor's rating and put it on a calendar basis. So I abstained from that conversation. They were taking away my instructor too. But the telephone rang back at Orange, Mass after we'd gone through this March 59 D license issuing thing. And Joe Crane called from Mineola, Long Island and says, hey Lou, you're D-Run, right? I said, yeah, that's right, Joe. He says, well, A1 was never issued. Would you like A1? I said, Joe, I got B11, C19, and D1. I'd love to have A1. He says, I'll ship the paperwork up to you. You ship it back and send me the dollars, and I'll send it to you. So I got A1 almost by default because it had never been issued. So I signed logbooks, A1 and D1, and for years I signed it nothing but D1. Then somebody said, you got any other licenses? And I started spitting them out. Then I realized, well, people were looking for antiquity, so A1 is antiquity. So now I sign them A1 and D1. So, and people misinterpret that. I think that I displaced Joe Crane and I was the original skydiver, which is never true. Too many people before me. I saw my doctor for my knees, and he said, Lou, you got to replace your right knee. And he said, well, we're at it, replace your left knee. And I said, well, what'd that do to my parachuting? He said, well, you'll have to stop parachuting. I said, no, Doc, I'm not stopping parachuting. I just won't have the knees replaced. I enjoy parachuting so much for the freedom, for the adventure, and for the personal reward. Like we just set a state, national, and world record. 6 of us today over 80. You've probably interviewed somebody about that. But in any case, I'm now another record holder. So it's just too adventuresome, it's just too enjoyable, and there's too many nice people in it. You build up a relationship and a comradeship with these people that are just, and it happens internationally. You know, when we went to Russia, they welcomed us as they could, the best they could, being communists and we being a free country. But there's a bond between parachutists that may exist in other activities, but I don't think to the extent that it does in parachuting.